When Kai Xiao's clear voice rang out, countless gazes in the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion immediately shot toward Mu Chen, as if they were arrows aimed directly at him. The intensity of those looks was enough to pierce through him. The three women present were undoubtedly among the most stunning beauties, yet they were all speaking only to him. This encounter, one that any man would envy, could not help but spark a feeling of jealousy. Mu Chen felt a chill in his heart from the countless sharp gazes, and with a helpless glare at Kai Xiao, he cupped his fists towards Su Biyue and Hong Yu with a smile. "Thank you for the kind invitation, but the position up there is too high. I think I'll pass, lest someone can't handle it." His words carried a hint of sarcasm, and the target of this sarcasm was clear to everyone. Some of the onlookers even cast glances toward the indifferent Lu Yan. Upon hearing Mu Chen's refusal, Su Biyue and Hong Yu both smiled and did not press the matter further. However, their beautiful eyes could not help but linger on Kai Xiao for a moment. Beautiful women were always sensitive to one another, and they both sensed a faint trace of danger emanating from her. That subtle sense of danger surprised the two women. With their strength, they could easily sense any danger among the younger generation of the northern domain, and there were only a handful of people capable of evoking such a feeling. But this breathtakingly beautiful girl, who was she? The two women exchanged a glance, then turned and returned to their seats. Mu Chen walked back to his position and glanced at Kai Xiao, who was holding a teacup with her little hands, her enchanting face adorned with a faint smile. He couldn't help but give her a sideways look. "Are you trying to get me killed?" Kai Xiao supported her delicate chin with her jade-like hand and smiled. "Those two women above are too beautiful and too dangerous. I'm just helping you out, so you don't get temporarily blinded by beauty. The most dangerous one is you." Mu Chen replied irritably, and he wasn't wrong. Although Su Biyue and Hong Yu were no pushovers, the woman in front of him was undoubtedly far more dangerous than either of them. "You're really ungrateful." Kai Xiao shook her head, then her gaze swept over the upper levels of the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion. There are a few noteworthy figures among the younger generation of the northern domain. Upon hearing this, Mu Chen's eyes narrowed, and his gaze followed hers to the upper levels of the pavilion. There, aside from Su Biyue, Hong Yu, and Lu Yan, he also sensed some subtle fluctuations of spiritual energy. One of those fluctuations had an extremely cold feeling, like a block of ancient ice hidden deep within the 9 netherworlds. As Mu Chen focused on the cold spiritual energy fluctuation, it seemed as though the source had noticed him. The icy aura, like a venomous snake, immediately began to invade, and just a slight touch would result in a backlash. Mu Chen hadn't expected such strong aggression from this person. Just a probe had provoked a counterattack. His brow furrowed as he quickly withdrew his spiritual energy perception. However, with that withdrawal came a chilling aura, like a parasite clinging to his mind. Mu Chen's eyes flared with violet flame, and the undying fire surged, instantly incinerating the cold energy. His spiritual energy perception, protected by the undying fire, retreated into his body. Such domineering cold energy. Mu Chen's eyes turned serious as he gazed toward a dark corner of the upper level. In the midst of this covert exchange, he had already guessed the source of that spiritual energy fluctuation. It must be the Netherworld Prince from the Netherworld Palace, ranked second on the Dragon Phoenix record. What about Feng Yi, ranked first? He hasn't shown up? Mu Chen muttered to himself. He hadn't sensed a more powerful spiritual fluctuation than the Netherworld Prince's, which could only mean two things. Either Feng Yi hadn't come, or he had concealed his spiritual energy to such an extent that even Mu Chen couldn't perceive it. If it was the latter, then Feng Yi was indeed someone to be feared. Mu Chen's expression grew even more serious. The experts listed on the Dragon Phoenix record were truly not to be underestimated, and rankings were misleading. Those ranked lower than Lu Yan might be far more troublesome. It seemed that in this Dragon Phoenix heaven, even he did not have absolute confidence in standing out. The atmosphere in the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion returned to normal, but this time, the gazes cast at Mu Chen were no longer filled with disdain. The absence of those prying eyes actually made Mu Chen feel considerably more at ease. Although his battle with Lu Yan had exposed some of his strength, it was still worth it to avoid unnecessary trouble. As Mu Chen pondered just how strong the experts attending the Dragon Phoenix heaven were, A crisp chime suddenly rang out from within the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion. In an instant, the entire pavilion fell silent. Countless eager eyes turned toward the upper levels of the pavilion, where an elderly figure slowly walked out. As soon as he appeared, all gazes grew intense and heated. The Dragon Phoenix heaven is becoming livelier with each passing year. The elderly figure looked at the many young but extraordinarily imposing figures inside the pavilion, smiled, and then spoke. Everyone, I am the pavilion master of the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion, Xiao. Greetings, Pavilion Master Mu. Although all the people inside the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion were elites of the younger generation from the Northern Domain, they still greeted him politely. This was because Xiao was no ordinary person in the Northern Domain. While the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion could only be considered a top-tier power due to its small numbers, its existence spanned a long time, and few forces in the Northern Domain could compare to it. The Dragon Phoenix Pavilion had remained stationed in the Dragon Phoenix ancient city and had not expanded its territory outward, keeping its number of enemies low. As a result, very few people would dare to offend them easily. Senior Mu, could you enlighten us on the situation in the Dragon Phoenix Heaven this time? Su Bu's gentle voice came from the direction of the 10,000 Saints Mountain. It was said that the people of the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion practiced a unique cultivation method derived from the Dragon Phoenix Heaven itself, allowing them to vaguely detect certain changes within it. Every time the Dragon Phoenix Heaven opened, they would reveal the information they had gathered. It is my duty. Xiao smiled warmly and said, when you all enter the Dragon Phoenix Heaven, I assume you seek the true dragon and true phoenix essence blood. However, the Dragon Phoenix Heaven is constantly shifting, so each time it opens, the situation will be vastly different from the last. Now, I have some not-so-good news to share. This time, there are only 5 Dragon Phoenix pools within the Dragon Phoenix Heaven. What? Only 5 Dragon Phoenix pools? As soon as the words were spoken, an uproar immediately broke out inside the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion, and many experts' faces darkened. What are Dragon Phoenix pools? Xiao turned to Chen and asked in a low voice. It is said that during the ancient era, when the true dragon and true phoenix fell, their skeletal remains scattered throughout the Dragon Phoenix Heaven. Some of these bones collided and formed the peculiar Dragon Phoenix pools. There are countless spirit beasts within the Dragon Phoenix Heaven, each of which possesses a trace of true dragon or true phoenix blood. By infusing this blood into the Dragon Phoenix pools and utilizing the power within the true dragon and true phoenix bones, one can cultivate the false dragon body and false phoenix body, Chen explained. False dragon body and false phoenix body. Xiao blinked her long lashes in confusion. Yes, because the most vital part of the Dragon Phoenix Heaven is the Dragon Phoenix altar deep within. The only way to qualify to ascend the Dragon Phoenix altar is to possess the false dragon body and false phoenix body. In other words, the only way to obtain the true treasures is through the purification in the Dragon Phoenix pools. Chen nodded and said, I heard that the last time, there were 9 Dragon Phoenix pools, but now there are only 5. Chen sighed helplessly. This was really adding fuel to the fire. It seemed that the competition for the Dragon Phoenix Heaven would be even fiercer this time. Xiao nodded in realization. While they were talking, Elder Xiao had already waved his hand, silencing the commotion in the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion. With a gentle swipe of his withered palm, a spiritual energy screen unfolded in front of him, revealing a blurry map. On the map, 5 bright light spots could be vaguely seen. These are the locations of the 5 Dragon Phoenix pools that we have detected, Xiao said. As soon as the words left his mouth, nearly everyone's eyes sharpened, and they quickly began imprinting the hazy map into their minds. Chen also stared at the spiritual energy screen, quickly memorizing the map. Although it was vague, it was still better than wandering around aimlessly later. Xiao, deep in thought, stared at the map and suddenly asked, how did they detect these Dragon Phoenix pools? Does that mean the Dragon Phoenix pool might not be limited to just these 5, after all? And if I'm not mistaken, these Dragon Phoenix pools have varying levels of strength. Xiao said with a smile. Chen was stunned for a moment, then nodded seriously, saying, you're right. But the Dragon Phoenix Heaven is fraught with danger. There are countless divine beasts that have become extremely powerful after obtaining the essence blood of true dragons and true phoenixes. Though their intelligence is low, their strength is extraordinarily formidable. Rushing around carelessly would be very dangerous, so generally speaking, no one would risk probing deeper. Xiao gently stroked a strand of her blue hair, and a seductive smile appeared on her alluring face. She looked at Chen and whispered, "I have a way to find a stronger dragon phoenix pool. Want to give it a try?" When Chen heard these tempting words slip from Xiao's lips, his heart skipped a beat. Even with his composure, he couldn't help but stare at her in astonishment. After a long pause, he lowered his voice and said, shocked, "How is that possible? If the dragon phoenix pools were really that easy to find, then every time the dragon phoenix heaven opened, there wouldn't be so many people fighting desperately for the few chances available. They can locate the dragon phoenix pools, so why can't I?" Xiao smiled faintly, her mysterious demeanor making Chen gape in awe. He knew well enough that the girl in front of him was indeed very mysterious. That should be very dangerous, right? Chen asked, pondering. Anyone who wants to obtain what others cannot has to pay the price that others cannot afford, Xiao said, her beautiful eyes looking at him. I don't think you're the type of person who expects opportunities to fall from the sky, right? I just don't want to do something for nothing, Chen said with a smile, then nodded slowly, his gaze serious as he looked at Xiao. But I am a bit interested in your proposal. If you're willing to give it a shot, I'll go with you. Smack. Xiao gently clapped her hands together and smiled gracefully. Then it's decided. But for my method to work, we first need to find a dragon phoenix pool. So after the dragon phoenix heaven opens, we'll have to compete for one. Still have to fight for the dragon phoenix pool? Then what's the point of searching for other ones? Chen frowned. Idiot. The dragon phoenix pools vary in strength, and they false dragon body and false phoenix body cultivated from them are naturally stronger or weaker. Getting an extra round of refining from the dragon phoenix pool will greatly benefit us in the upcoming trials of dragon phoenix heaven, Xiao said, speaking confidently, her demeanor entirely that of someone who knew exactly what she was talking about. Chen thought for a moment, and reluctantly had to admit that Xiao was right. However, he couldn't help but grimace. It seemed like they would still need to fight for a dragon phoenix pool first. That fierce battle would probably be unavoidable, especially since there were only 5 dragon phoenix pools available for the opening of the dragon phoenix heaven. The competition would definitely be intense. As Chen and Xiao spoke in hushed tones, the clamor inside the dragon phoenix pavilion grew louder and louder. The number of 5 dragon phoenix pools seemed to have sparked quite a stir among them. Xiao saw this and shook his head helplessly, then said, "According to our estimates, the dragon phoenix heaven will fully open tomorrow. That will be the best time to enter. But the dragon phoenix heaven is fraught with dangers. While those exotic beasts may not be highly intelligent, their power is terrifying because of the true dragons and true phoenixes that fell there. I hope everyone will be well prepared." After his words, Xiao said no more and turned slowly to leave, leaving behind the increasingly noisy atmosphere of the dragon phoenix pavilion. "Let's go. There's nothing more to stay for here. We'll wait for the opening of the dragon phoenix heaven tomorrow," Chen said, standing up and addressing Xiao. Xiao nodded slightly, and the two of them left the dragon phoenix pavilion. Their departure caught the attention of several people. Su Biyue and Hong Yu's beautiful eyes flickered slightly. Though Chen appeared to be only a 3rd grade supreme from the great Luo heaven domain, his displayed combat power far surpassed that. This was something they couldn't ignore. It seemed that this time, many dark horses would emerge in the dragon phoenix heaven. Lu Yan, with a cold expression, watched Chen and Xiao leave. A chilling light flickered in his eyes as he murmured to himself, "I'll let you be smug for one more day." However, as Chen and Xiao were leaving, no one noticed a brief fluctuation in the higher levels, followed by a sudden disappearance, as if a shadow had vanished into thin air. After Chen and Xiao left the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion, they headed west towards the Dragon Phoenix ancient city, intending to find a place to rest for the night. But as they passed through the narrow ancient streets and entered a quiet, less traveled alley, Xiao's graceful body paused slightly. Her beautiful eyes narrowed, resembling a cat's gaze. "Been tailing us for so long, Yet you haven't shown yourself? As soon as Kai Xiao spoke, lightning exploded around Mu Chen's body. He clenched his hand, and the great Xun'er demon pillar appeared, striking forcefully at an empty space behind them. In that void, a slender hand seemed to emerge, lightly tapping the great Xun'er demon pillar. Instantly, visible ripples spread out from the impact. Boom! The earth cracked, and the great Xun'er demon pillar was sent flying back. Mu Chen staggered, his feet causing the stone pavement beneath him to crumble into dust. He fixed his gaze on the direction where the disturbance came from. The space began to ripple, and a figure dressed in white slowly materialized. The figure had long black hair, sword-like brows, and eyes that sparkled like stars. His face was exceptionally handsome, and a mysterious aura seemed to emanate from him. Impressive. I didn't expect even my void concealment art to escape your perception. When did someone this capable appear among the younger generation of the northern domain? The man in white smiled faintly, but his eyes were fixed on Kai Xiao as he asked in a soft voice. Although the figure in white was the kind of handsome man who could make girls swoon, Kai Xiao only gave him a casual glance and said, "Just a void concealment art. It's not as impressive as you think. Who are you? Why are you following us?" Mu Chen frowned and asked, "Apologies, I overheard your conversation by accident, and I became a bit interested," the man in white replied. Mu Chen's eye sharpened. He had been using spiritual energy to shield their voices when speaking with Kai Xiao, yet this person had still managed to detect them. That level of skill was truly remarkable. Interested? Then you can go have fun by yourself. We don't need any extra help. Kai Xiao's clear voice was void of any enthusiasm. It was obvious she wasn't interested in people who inserted themselves into matters uninvited. The man in white didn't expect Kai Xiao to reject him so decisively. He frowned slightly and said, "If I help, your chances of success will increase greatly. Perhaps no one will be able to interfere with us. Though, I assume you're not someone who's content with just that." Kai Xiao waved her hand lightly. "Leave. I won't hold it against you for eavesdropping and stalking. Not even going to think it over." The man's deep eyes seemed to glow as he whispered, "It's always better to have one more friend, right? Threatening me?" Kai Xiao smiled, a captivating charm in her smile that could make anyone's heart skip a beat. The man in white said nothing, but his gaze remained locked on Kai Xiao. In the next moment, his eyes narrowed, and his figure suddenly vanished. Swish. However, as soon as he disappeared, Kai Xiao's figure also vanished from the spot and appeared several hundred meters away. Her slender finger then suddenly pointed at the empty space. Boom. The space there seemed to vibrate as Kai Xiao's finger seemed to pierce through the very fabric of space. A massive spiritual energy storm exploded, shattering the stones of the alley into dust. Kai Xiao retreated immediately and landed back where she had been. She looked at the space that was slowly returning to calm, raising an eyebrow in surprise. "This guy's not bad. Too bad I have too many seals on me, or I'd lock him in space so that he couldn't escape." Clearly, in the earlier exchange, she hadn't gained much of an advantage. Mu Chen pondered for a moment, then said softly, "If I'm not mistaken, that person is probably Fong Yi, ranked first on the Dragon Phoenix record from the Divine Hall." "Ah, so you've practically offended all the top 5 on that list," Kai Xiao said with surprise, though the amusement in her eyes couldn't be hidden. Mu Chen gritted his teeth and looked at her. "This guy is too scheming. I don't like him, so I don't want to cooperate." Kai Xiao shrugged indifferently, showing no sign of hesitation despite the fact that the man she was referring to was ranked first in the Dragon Phoenix record, a formidable figure. "Do whatever you want." Mu Chen nodded. The man in white did give off an oppressive vibe, and Mu Chen wasn't particularly eager to cooperate with him. Although offending him might cause some trouble, Mu Chen was never afraid of trouble. Mu Chen's equally indifferent attitude surprised Kai Xiao a little. She laughed. "I thought you'd be reluctant. After all, if you befriended him, even Lu Yin wouldn't dare to mess with you. If he wants to make a move, let him. I'm not afraid, and I don't make friends just to use them as pawns." Mu Chen smiled slightly, but then turned his gaze to Kai Xiao with a playful look. "Besides, there's still you. Although Fong Yi is strong, you're no slouch either. I was just starting to appreciate you." Kai Xiao rolled her eyes at Mu Chen, ignoring him as she turned and walked toward the street. Mu Chen chuckled and followed her. After they left, On the roof of a distant house, space distorted, and a figure in white appeared. He watched their retreating forms before lowering his head. A faint bloodstain appeared on his fingertip. A glint of light flickered in his deep eyes, and then he smiled faintly. With a wave of his sleeve, his figure vanished into thin air. This girl, who exactly is she? This Dragon Phoenix Heaven event is getting interesting. The next day, when the first rays of dawn pierced the darkness, casting their light over the ancient land of the Dragon Phoenix mountain range, the spiritual energy in the entire world seemed to subtly begin to boil. Countless wind-breaking sounds echoed from beyond the mountains, and like locusts, they swept across the sky, heading straight for the location of the Dragon Phoenix ancient city. Clearly, the news about the opening of the Dragon Phoenix Heaven had spread to everyone in just one night. Chen and Xiao stood atop a towering roof, watching the vast sea of people ahead, which felt like a cloud pressing down from the sky. Chen couldn't help but exclaim. The allure of the Dragon Phoenix Heaven was immense. It seemed that nearly all of the young generation with any strength in the northern domain had gathered here. The sheer scale of it was staggering. The morning sunlight poured down, and everyone's gaze was intensely fixed on the distant mountains, where the space above seemed to ripple like water. There was a faint aura of desolation emanating from it, spreading through the heavens and earth. That was the location where the Dragon Phoenix Heaven would open. Time passed slowly, and by the time the sun reached its zenith, the number of people in the area had reached terrifying levels. Waves of spiritual energy rippled through the air, causing the very space to distort. Suddenly, the spiritual energy in the air seemed to boil like water, becoming wild and chaotic. Vast spiritual energy began to gather above the ancient mountain range, and it seemed as if the energy was transforming into a massive wave of spiritual force, surging through the sky. The space there continued to warp under the pressure of the spiritual energy torrent. Countless people stared at this scene, their hearts racing. As the space twisted to an extreme, a huge beam of light slowly appeared and began to tear the space apart. Endless light poured out from the rift in the space. In that instant, a sound resembling the roars of dragons and cries of phoenixes echoed through the heavens and earth, as if passed down from the ancient times. The dragon's roar was unlike anything Chen had ever heard. Within it, there was a kind of majesty that seemed capable of surpassing even the heavens and earth, sending shivers down one's spine. The Dragon Phoenix Heaven has opened. A voice, full of excitement and trembling, suddenly rang out from the boiling crowd, igniting the fiery atmosphere in the air. Swish, swish. Countless eyes turned red, and in the next moment, streams of spiritual energy shot up, tearing through the sky. The sound of the wind breaking was so sharp it formed an explosion, and the entire scene became a chaotic rush of figures, resembling locusts as they charged into the rift in space. This world was clearly in turmoil because of this. Xiao gently nodded her head. The two of them moved simultaneously. Just like before, they transformed into beams of light, sweeping through the vast torrent of light and shadow, eventually entering the space where the ancient sounds of dragon roars and phoenix cries echoed. In the instant they burst into Dragon Phoenix Heaven, Xiao suddenly grasped Chen's hand. The cool, jade-like touch made him pause for a moment. Before he could speak, the surrounding space fluctuated violently. The space began to twist intensely. However, the sense of distortion quickly vanished, and Chen felt his feet touch solid ground. The surrounding scenery, once blurred, rapidly became clear. He opened his eyes slightly, then froze. The landscape around them had dramatically changed. The rolling mountains had disappeared, replaced by a dim red grassland. They were now standing atop a hill in the grassland. A light breeze with an ancient scent swept through, causing the dark red grass to stir as if a blood sea was churning. The scene gave off a slightly ominous vibe. Buzz, buzz. At this moment, the space above the grassland trembled, and figures began to flash in and out, clearly people who had passed through the spatial rift into Dragon Phoenix Heaven. But judging by their appearance, it was clear that the chaotic spatial fluctuations had randomly dispersed them when they passed through. This was why Xiao had held his hand, ensuring they wouldn't be separated. As the figures appeared, the once silent dark red grassland quickly became bustling with activity. Countless people looked around curiously, their eyes burning with excitement as they surveyed the unfamiliar land. Some couldn't wait and shot off toward the distance. Chen looked at the red grassland, his brow furrowing slightly, sensing a faint unease. Buzz, buzz. Just as that uneasy feeling rose within Chen, the dark red grassland suddenly seemed to come alive. The red grasses lifted into the air, then disintegrated mid-flight into countless crimson blood mists. The blood mist swept over dozens of figures who had just taken flight. Boom. The dozens of experts reacted swiftly, unleashing their spiritual energy to shatter the blood mist. However, when their powers collided with the mist, they had no effect. The blood mist engulfed them, and before they could even scream, they were reduced to nothing but white bones, falling from the sky. The commotion on the grassland abruptly stopped. Countless experts stared in shock at the scene. "What is that?" someone exclaimed in horror. Chen's gaze was fixed on the blood mist, his pupils suddenly narrowing. He realized the blood mist was not mist at all, but was formed by countless dark red, monstrous insects. The insects were no bigger than a thumb, but their numbers were staggering. Wherever they passed, even spiritual energy was consumed. Suddenly, Chen had a thought. He waved his sleeve, releasing his spiritual energy to sweep across the dark red grassland. Where his energy passed, all the red grasses soared into the air, transforming into clouds of blood-red insect mist. The scene made Chen's scalp tingle. This was no grassland. This was a field of insects disguised as a grassland. "Run!" Chen grabbed Xiao's delicate wrist and soared into the air. The danger in Dragon Phoenix Heaven was far beyond his expectations. In such a perilous place, even the slightest mistake could turn them into piles of bones. As Chen soared upward, many young experts in the sky also began fleeing in a panic. It seemed they too realized they had been unluckily transported to a deadly place. Buzz, buzz. The frantic movements of the fleeing figures immediately stirred up countless monstrous insects. It was as though the entire crimson grassland had come alive. Dark red tornadoes of wind appeared and began sweeping toward the fleeing figures. Buzz. A tornado formed by a sea of dark red insects swiftly rushed toward Chen. The overwhelming force of it made his expression change. He immediately waved his sleeve again, sending out a powerful spiritual energy lash. Boom. The two forces collided, but most of Chen's spiritual energy was devoured by the dark red insects. However, after consuming the energy, some of the insects started to ignite, faint purple flames flickering in their bodies. "You've merged a decent flame into your spiritual energy," Xiao reminded. "Activate it." Although these creatures can devour spiritual energy, they fear the flames. Chen nodded, his mind shifting. In an instant, purple flames began to spread from his body, forming a fire barrier that enveloped both of them. Whoosh! Protected by the undying fire, Chen shot forward, charging straight into the obstructing swarm of insects. The strange insects, tainted by the purple flames, turned to ash, their piercing screeches echoing incessantly. Chen sped through, and behind him, the sounds of agonized screams echoed as countless young powerful cultivators were engulfed by the swarm, their bones scattered. However, Chen couldn't save them. Once trapped in the swarm, even with the protection of the undying fire, death was inevitable. It was only a matter of time before they were worn down. Whoosh! At full speed, Chen soared for nearly 10 minutes before breaking free of the crimson grassland and landing atop a barren stone mountain. He turned to look back, seeing a sea of red mist rising from the grassland, like a disaster unfolding. But besides themselves, a few figures were also stumbling out of the chaos. These people, like Chen, had once merged flame power into their spiritual energy, using it to break free from the insect swarm's encirclement. Such heavy casualties, Chen said grimly. There had been at least 1,000 powerful cultivators on the grassland, but now, fewer than 100 had escaped. The death toll was staggering, and even Chen couldn't help but feel a chill run down his spine. The dangers of Dragon Phoenix Heaven were far greater than he had expected. Chen shook his head, suppressing the shock within him. He flicked his fingers, and spiritual energy surged, forming a map in front of him. It was the map he had obtained from the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion. However, the map was quite vague. After some time of exploration in the area, Chen and Xiao had roughly determined their location. "We should head in this direction," Xiao said, pointing to the lower left corner of the map with her delicate finger. She then slowly moved her finger up, indicating the closest light spot on the map. "The Dragon Phoenix Pool is here. Let's head there first." Only after finding a Dragon Phoenix Pool would Xiao be able to use its power to locate other Dragon Phoenix Pools. Chen nodded, showing no hesitation. With a wave of his sleeve, he stowed the map away and glanced southwest, taking a deep breath. Although this was his first time in Dragon Phoenix Heaven, he could already imagine the greater dangers awaiting them in the vicinity of the Dragon Phoenix Pool. But these dangers would not stop him. "Let's go," Chen said softly, then shot into the sky, heading towards the location of the Dragon Phoenix Pool. Xiao followed closely behind. Whoosh! In the somewhat desolate sky, two streaks of light streaked by at high speed. They moved swiftly, yet silently, clearly suppressing any noise deliberately. In the blink of an eye, the two figures sped across several miles. But moments later, they suddenly halted, their figures flashing before landing on a mountain peak below, disappearing from sight. Not long after they hid, the ground beneath them trembled as if the earth was shaking. Space rippled, and over 100 enormous beasts flew past, their roars filled with a bloodthirsty aura. Chen and Xiao concealed themselves in the shadows. Watching the groups of beasts pass by, Chen couldn't help but shake his head. The number of such beasts in Dragon Phoenix Heaven was overwhelming. Although they had low intelligence, they possessed tremendous power due to the blood essence of the true dragon and true phoenix that filled this space. Once surrounded by these frenzied beasts, even if one could escape, the energy expended would be enormous. So, for the entire journey, if they encountered too large a pack, Chen and Xiao would avoid it whenever possible. "We should be close to the Dragon Phoenix Pool now," Xiao said, scanning the surroundings. Chen nodded, feeling a strange fluctuation coming from the distant area. The pressure emanating from it was so powerful that even from afar, it caused Chen's spiritual energy to feel slightly stagnant. Chen's eyes flickered. Right now, within the Dragon Phoenix Heaven, they only knew of 5 Dragon Phoenix Pools. However, the number of young and powerful cultivators flooding into this place was extraordinarily frightening. One could imagine how intense the competition would be for these 5 pools. In the end, those who managed to break through the numerous obstacles and reach the Dragon Phoenix Pool would likely be the elite among the young powerhouses. When the time comes, the battle would be incredibly fierce. After the large group of exotic beasts flew by, Chen and Xiao rushed forward again. In the following half hour, they encountered dozens of waves of beast herds. Although they did their best to avoid conflict, they still had to engage in battle with some beasts due to their exceptional sensory abilities. This, in turn, affected their travel speed. However, this anomaly strangely reassured Chen. It seemed that the Dragon Phoenix Pool they were looking for must be in this direction, otherwise, there wouldn't be so many exotic beasts around here. It was said that the closer one got to the Dragon Phoenix Pool, the more powerful the beasts guarding it would be. Therefore, they couldn't afford to let their guard down just yet. With Chen's cautious approach, they managed to pass through the next stretch of road without any significant danger. They crossed over a mountain range and then arrived at a solitary peak. As they gazed forward, their expressions suddenly tightened. What appeared before them was a vast stretch of collapsed earth, crisscrossed with deep chasms. The ominous and jagged landscape clearly showed signs of a cataclysmic battle that had once shaken the heavens. At the very center of this collapsed land, a towering mountain stood. The peak soared into the clouds, its faint pale hue revealing its true form, a mountain of skeletal remains. The bones were so massive that, when piled together, they formed an enormous bone mountain. On the bone mountain, ancient light patterns could be faintly seen. These patterns seemed to stir gently, as though they possessed some form of life. A terrifying pressure emanated from the mountain, making the air feel heavy and sending chills down one's spine. The Dragon Phoenix Pool should be at the top of that bone mountain. Chen's gaze was fixed on the summit, where the clouds swirled. But clearly, The pressure radiating from the mountain's peak was the most intense. Kai Xiao's beautiful eyes gazed at the collapsed earth and the bone mountain, her voice calm. Quite a few people have arrived. Mu Chen nodded lightly. On this vast land, he had already sensed numerous spiritual energy fluctuations. The number wasn't small, confirming that those who entered the Dragon Phoenix heaven were no mere novices. Let's wait and see. The Dragon Phoenix pool is right in front of us, but it won't be easy to claim. Mu Chen spoke calmly, not letting the allure of the pool cloud his judgment. He knew that the most dangerous things were always near the greatest treasures. This Dragon Phoenix heaven was fraught with peril. Getting this far was already a tremendous challenge, and claiming the Dragon Phoenix pool would be no simple task. Kai Xiao wasn't surprised by Mu Chen's composed demeanor. After spending several days with him, she had come to understand that this young man possessed intelligence and composure far beyond ordinary people. However, it was clear that not everyone had such a calm attitude when faced with great treasures. Not long after Mu Chen and Kai Xiao arrived, figures began to appear in the distant mountain ranges. These individuals were all surrounded by powerful spiritual energy fluctuations, signaling their strength. Those who had managed to bypass the fierce beasts and rush ahead to the Dragon Phoenix pool were likely no ordinary people. There were about 100 of them. They seemed to be aware of the dangers surrounding the Bone Mountain, so they didn't charge recklessly but instead formed a loose alliance, ready to face any dangers together. Whoosh! 100 streaks of light swiftly passed by and then scattered, heading toward the Bone Mountain. Mu Chen silently observed the scene. Then his gaze sharpened as he heard a shrill cry suddenly echo from the Bone Mountain. A woo! As soon as the scream rang out, the Bone Mountain seemed to tremble violently. A dozen or so young powerhouses charged in the fastest, and in the blink of an eye, they were surrounded by hundreds of white shadows. The sharp claws and winds tore through the very fabric of space as they came. However, these individuals were not slow to react. They immediately unleashed their spiritual energy, forming multiple layers of protection. Swish! But the protection did not save them as they had hoped. The claws, covered in black scales, instantly tore through their defenses, slicing through them mercilessly. Blood gushed out, and within moments, these young powerhouses were dismembered before they could even let out a scream. A piercing scream rang out from another direction, and the hundreds of young powerhouses, faces filled with terror, frantically retreated. In just a few breaths, nearly half of them were torn apart. What a terrifying, exotic beast. Mu Chen's face grew serious as he observed the scene. His eyes glinted with spiritual light, allowing him to see the white shadows clearly. They were clearly ape-like exotic beasts, their bodies about 10 feet tall, with enormous black claws. The blackness was a layer of dense black scales, reflecting a chilling gleam under the sunlight. Moreover, they had bone wings on their backs, giving them incredible speed. The essence blood of the true dragon and true phoenix really messed up this space, Kai Xiao remarked with a slight pout. Initially, this space seemed ordinary, but after the fall of the true dragon and true phoenix, combined with certain unique conditions, it gave birth to these exotic beasts, low in intelligence, yet incredibly powerful. Mu Chen nodded. These white apes might only possess the strength of a first or second grade supreme individually, but their numbers were overwhelming. The sight of them leaping out in swarms was enough to send chills down anyone's spine. And Mu Chen's gaze shifted to the depths of Bone Mountain. He sensed even more violent fluctuations from deeper within. Bone Mountain was not a place to tread lightly. Above the sky, a bloody aura swirled. After killing the invaders, the white apes did not pursue them, but instead circled around Bone Mountain. Their overwhelming numbers seemed to shroud the mountain entirely. The young powerhouses that had fled in panic were all pale, still shaken, and filled with fear. The earlier scene had clearly dealt them a heavy blow. In this area, the other young powerhouses who had been watching coldly also showed signs of unease. No one dared act rashly anymore, their eyes filled with caution. However, the silence didn't last long, for everyone knew that as time passed, more people would arrive, and the chances of obtaining the Dragon Phoenix pool would grow slimmer. Everyone, waiting here is not the solution. These white apes are strong, but if we work together, they won't be able to stop us, said one sharp-eyed individual, his deep voice resonating through the air, amplified by spiritual energy. "All right, let's strike together." This voice was met with several agreements, as it was clear that they couldn't afford to delay any longer. If they worked together, they should be able to break through the White Ape's blockade. Boom, boom. Powerful surges of spiritual energy shot into the sky, and in the distance above the mountain range, beams of light slowly hovered into the air. The number was quite staggering. We should prepare to act as well. Chen smiled as he watched the scene. He had been waiting for this moment, waiting for the other powerhouses to strike. Only with their help in tearing apart the White Ape formation could he seize the opportunity to scale Bone Mountain. "Don't think you're the only one trying to be the fisherman." Xiao smiled charmingly. There were many strong figures here, some clearly hiding their true strength. Since the beginning, no one had revealed themselves, which was obviously because they shared the same thought as Chen. "Let's see who's hidden deeper." Chen smiled, his eyes full of battle intent.